continuing on with our discussion of Andre and Wally's back and forth, part of the movie My Dinner with Andre. Keep reading here. Wally says, "Yeah, of course, personally, I usually don't like those quiet moments. I really don't. I mean, I don't know if that's the Freudian thing or what, but the fear of unconscious impulses or my own aggression or whatever. But if things got too quiet and I find myself just sitting there, as we were saying before, I mean, whether I by myself or I'm with someone else, I just have this feeling of, my God, I'm going to be revealed. In other words, I'm adequate to do any sort of task, but I'm not adequate just to be a human being. I mean, in other words, I'm not, if I'm just trapped there and I'm not allowed to do things, but all I can do is just be there, well, I'll just fail. I mean, in other words, I can pass any other sort of test, and I can even get an A if I put the required effort. But I don't just have a clue how to pass this test. I mean, of course, I realize this isn't a test, but I see it as a test, and I feel I'm going to fail it. I mean, it's very scary. I just feel just totally at sea. I mean, Andre responds, "Well, I could imagine a life, Wally, in which each day would become an incredible, monumental creative task, and we're not necessarily up to it. I mean, if you felt like walking out on the person you live with, you'd walk out. Then, if you felt like it, you'd come back. But meanwhile, the other person would have reacted to your walking out. It would be a life of such feeling. I mean, what was amazing in the workshops I led was how quickly people seemed to fall into enthusiasm, celebration, joy, wonder, abandon, wildness, tenderness. Could you stand to live like that?" Wally responds, "Yeah, I think it's that moment of contact with another person. I mean, that's what scares us. I mean, that moment of being face to face with another person. I mean, now you wouldn't think it'd be so frightening. It's strange that we find it so frightening." Andre, well, it isn't that strange. I mean, first of all, there are some pretty good reason for being frightened. I mean, a human being is a complex and dangerous creature. I mean, really, if you start living each moment, Christ, that's quite a challenge. I mean, if you really reach out and you're really in touch with the other person, well, that is something to strive for. I think, I really do. Well, he says, "Yeah, it's just so pathetic if one doesn't do that." Andre keeps going, "Of course, there's a problem because the closer you come, I think, to another human being, the more completely mysterious and unreachable that person becomes. I mean, you have to reach out and you have to go back and forth with them and you have to relate, and yet you're relating to a ghost or something. I don't know, because we're ghosts, we're phantoms. Who are we?" And if and that's to face to confront the fact that you're completely alone, and to accept that you're alone is to accept death. Wally responds, "You mean because somehow when you're alone with death? I mean, nothing's obstructing your view of it, something like that?" Andre, right. Wally says, "If I understood it correctly, I think Heidegger said that if you were to experience your own being to the full, you'd be experiencing the decay of that being towards death as part of your experience." Andre responds, "In the sexual act is that moment of complete forgetting, which is so incredible. Then in the next moment, you start to think about things, work on the play, what you've got to do tomorrow. I don't know if this is true of you, but I think it must be quite common. The world comes in quite fast. Now that again may be because we're afraid to stay in that place of forgetting, because that again is close to death, like people who are afraid to go to sleep. In other words, you interrelate and you don't know what the next moment will bring. And to not know what the next moment will bring brings you closer to the perception of death. You see, that's why I think that people have affairs. Well, I mean, in the theater, if you get good reviews, you feel for a moment that you've got your hands on something. You know what I mean? I mean, it's a good feeling, and then that feeling goes quite quickly. And once again, you don't know how quite you should, what you should do next, what'll happen. Well, have an affair, and up to a certain point, you really feel that you're on firm ground. You know there's a sexual conquest to be made. There are different questions. Does she enjoy the ears being nibbled? How intensely can you talk about Schopenhauer in some elegant French restaurant? Whatever nonsense it is. It's all, I think, to give you the semblance that there's firm earth. Well, have a real relationship with a person that goes on for years. That's completely unpredictable. Then you've cut off all your ties to the land and you're sailing into the unknown, into uncharted seas. I mean, people hold on to these images, father, mother, husband, wife, again for the same reason, because they seem to provide some firm ground. But there's no wife there. What does that mean? A wife, a husband, a son. A baby holds your hand, and then suddenly there's this huge man lifting you off the ground, and then he's gone. Where's that son? And that's the end of the movie.